Hello, my name is Jacqueline Pollauf, and today I wanted to share a quick tip about performance preparation. Now, frequently when a student is preparing for a performance, they're very focused on everything that they're doing musically on the harp. They're really working to make sure that their piece is well prepared and that it feels secure technically and musically, and all of those really important things. But most students also recognize that when it comes to performing, even if they've played their piece 100 times, it's going to feel a bit different in that performance. And there are many different aspects to this and why it feels so different. But today I wanted to focus in specifically on the performance setting. Many students have their harp set up somewhere, and every time they practice, they come back to this exact same setting, perhaps a corner of their living room. And what can easily happen is that a student might not realize quite how accustomed to their particular setting they are until they give a performance and find themselves in a different setting. So perhaps a student has a performance coming up in a concert hall or a school or a retirement home, and when they arrive and sit down to perform, suddenly they're aware of how much the setting around them has changed. Things might look very different visually. The lighting might change, the temperature might change. There's all kinds of aspects to the setting that can change. And sometimes a student finds themselves really thrown by all of these changes. But of course, there's some ways that a student can practice to prepare for alterations to the setting. Now, of course, if a student can have a rehearsal within the performance space, that is a great approach. But it is also possible to vary different aspects of a setting within a student's home and really develop the skill of flexibility for different types of performance settings. So one great approach is simply to move the harp to a different spot, maybe a different corner of the living room or a different room entirely. And by doing this, a student will immediately change the visual backdrop, kind of what's behind the strings. And many students feel like when they're playing, they're just focused on the strings and their hands on them. And they don't really notice the visual backdrop until it changes. But frequently, if the whatever is behind them visually is very busy or has a lot of bright colors, that can be really distracting. So by systematically moving the harp from spot to spot and changing that visual backdrop, a student can really get good at kind of blocking out whatever is back there and truly focusing on just their hands and the strings. Lighting is another big area, and that's pretty easy to vary. Even without moving the harp, it's easy enough to add some extra lamps or perhaps make the lighting really dim and practice playing regardless of whether the lighting is ideal or less than ideal. Temperature can be another big factor. A student might find themselves in a concert hall that's quite chilly, and it can be really hard to play very confidently if a student is just focused on how chilly they feel or, of course, how warm they feel. So a student can easily change the temperature setting in their home, or perhaps wear extra clothing or less clothing than usual to try and replicate the feelings of playing in different temperatures. And finally, there's the music stand and bench, which are integral parts of the performance. And consequently, if those change, that can really throw a student. So frequently, I suggest that if a student can, they just take along their personal music stand and bench and keep those aspects of the performance consistent. So if you're preparing for a performance and want to spend some time kind of scientifically working through all of these different ways to vary your setting, I think that would be a great idea, and I hope this tip is helpful.